once more introducing all the panelists. Pooja, Jethwani is over here, Indu, Sharma, Atul, Raja, Nikhil, Bharadwaj, Ritu, Jhingon, and the topic for their discussion is PR should play an important role in enhancing CSR and ESG. CEOs of organizations should actively participate, push CSR in a big way. Ladies and gentlemen, this is IMAGEXX 2022. Off you go.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Adgili. Thank you to all the wonderful industry leaders sharing stage with me today. We'll try not to make the first post-lunch session boring or a snooze fest for you. We'll try to keep it as fun, as interesting as possible. It is a serious subject, something that helps us question a lot of things, especially in the context of the last 2 years. I'd like to quote Viktor Frankl, and I'm not sure how many of you have read him. He was an Austrian researcher, philosopher, and a Holocaust survivor. When it became extremely difficult for him to survive a concentration camp, he wrote a book, Man's Search for Meaning. And he wrote in it that life becomes unbearable, not because of our circumstances, but because of a lack of meaning and purpose. I think the last 2 years, all of us, including myself, have been questioning, trying to find meaning and purpose in whatever we do. We've seen, or should we say, we find ourselves in an extremely conflicted world today as we sit here. We are a privileged lot, I must say, but outside there is conflict in terms of inequity, in terms of poverty, access to healthcare, education, the list goes on and on. Climate change, how can we forget that? And I have panelists from different cities, from Pune, Bangalore, Delhi, who bring different kinds of weather, hopefully a pleasant one to Delhi, I really hope. But at the same time, after the last 2 years, there has been a renewed commitment among stakeholders as well to do purpose-led work. And this is what over the next 40 years we'd love to talk about, that how are leaders inspiring, delivering and pursuing purpose. There are, whether you talk about investors wanting to invest in purposeful businesses, employees wanting to work with responsible and ethical companies, consumers becoming increasingly conscious of what they buy, where are their products coming from, or at the end of the day, businesses who hold themselves accountable at the end of the day. In that context, I'm going to begin and start with my first question to Atul. Why do you feel that ESG or CSR, I know it's been a mandate, a law for the last 14 years, ESG compliance has now started becoming increasingly crucial. Why should it be a CXO priority, first of all? And how are CXOs embracing it? And we'd love to hear some of your personal experiences, especially in the context of the last 2 years, if you've evolved in that journey.
Yeah, thank you, Pooja. And hello to everybody in the audience. Thanks for having me here. A pretty interesting topic, and I was sharing with Pooja off stage that this is actually the right time to talk about CSR. Last 2 years should be doing to CSR what the last 7-8 years haven't done. That's what I feel. And it's been a wake-up call for all of us, and it's been definitely a wake-up call in the social development sector that I represent. So we all are looking at CSR from a very different lens today, and that's the reason why any CXO should and would also look at ESG and CSR very differently. Just to answer your question, Pooja, let me just divide it into 2 parts. Let me look at the macro perspective and then the micro perspective. Macro is more from an external stakeholder angle. If you see the generic stuff, any socially responsible organization is good news for the partners and investors and stakeholders. So I would not like to elaborate that. From a consumer angle, the CXOs are too aware of the fact that today's consumers are actually changing. They are too much value oriented. They are socially and environmentally aware. And to add to this, the millennials now are forming a great chunk of the workforce. So the more socially responsible an organization is, the better it is for that organization. From the brand angle, I think any CXO would know that it would help you to stand out in the competition. uh, a great deal of social responsibility, and a reputation for the same cultivates great brand equity and also generates customer loyalty. It is proven again and again. And from the organizational angle as well, if you see on the face of it, it looks like you're presenting an ethical face to the organization, of the organization, but actually you are identifying and you are quantifying the threats and the opportunities for the organization from a CXO angle. So it's much deeper than that. And I won't dwell too much on the micro aspects because there's no rocket science to it, but just to let go of few pointers for further discussion. There is this top line that CSR would always help, and that's the bread and butter for any CXO. I was reading a Deloitte survey, a very recent Deloitte survey, and I was surprised to see that 68% of the consumers have actually said that they would spend more on a socially responsible and a trustworthy brand than any other brand that they were using. So from a person who's responsible for the top line and the bottom line of the organization, absolutely important. It leads to a great deal of cost rationalization within the organization, whether it is catering to wastage of resources or it is catering to optimal use of resources. And a socially responsible organization, I am actually privy to that, is a greatly empowered organization, is a greatly motivated organization, right? So that leads to enhanced productivity. So these are some of the things that I think any CXO would be music to any CXO's ears. So these are some of the basics, but what I was trying to harp upon, those basics and the way we have addressed those basics in the since 2014 and post-pandemic, I think, which we will talk about now, will be very different, and that could be transformational.
Thank you, Atul. It's a good start to at least highlight what CEOs have been considering or should consider important. Ritu, I'd love to ask my next question to you to say, you've been doing this for years. I've told you before, I'm saying this again on this stage. I'm a big fan of the Nand Ghar program. It's a phenomenal program that delivers impact at such massive scale and truly a partner for the government to drive change on ground. In that, it's also important to integrate whether it's ESG principles, your goals, or CSR to public relations. How do you think the industry has been able to or not been able to do that? And you've been in the industry for so many years, spoken to so many of your colleagues and peers. Are they finding some challenges in doing that? Because while you've done successfully, we still see a lot of businesses not being able to do that.
Okay, I think this is a very interesting question and more importantly very close to my heart. As an organization, let me say people pick up initiatives which are need-based, right? Which we know that where directly communities should benefit from, and impact really is measurable. So when we set out to do, as a case study, if we are talking about Nand Ghar, we decided that what is it as an organization we stand for, and as a country really what is required. So we said, let's focus. We are not the government, we can't do everything. So can we focus on children and mothers? And we all do know that the first 1,000 days for a kid matters the most. And Anganwadi is a place or the ICDS program which started many years ago, and we said if we support that, we could actually make a large difference in rural India. So when the project started about 5 years ago, and to say that, we also didn't know how it's going to go, where it's going to go. And we decided that, 4,000 of these Anganwadis, we will change. We will change in terms of education, providing education through digital and totally digitizing it. It'll run in a 52-inch television, and when you go there, it's unreal to see these young children from 0 to 6 age group from Anganwadi sitting and getting standardized education. 2, very clearly, nutrition becomes an important part. So holistic healthcare we gave through a doctor at doorstep. 3, very clearly, when you give health education, nutrition, we got a mobile health van at a doorstep, so it was a doctor at doorstep. And during the pandemic times, we even did, education, which were capsules which would go on smartphones, dial a doctor through the Ghar program. And lastly, skill training, which led to, whether it was mask making, whether it was helping in PPEs during that time. But more importantly, your question about how did that integrate into a sort of a marketing PR piece? I must say that causes become movements. We were one organization that started this 5 years ago, and today there are many organizations which are following suit. What really has that led? I think when we do PR, we don't say, hey, you know what, this is what I'm doing. It's about, these are the number of people who have directly impacted and benefited. Can we as corporates join together and make this a movement? So for me, I think that really has been the key piece. Ghar, from a digital advertising to print advertising, and now people are talking about it. It's only, and thank you for bringing it up. This is the way today we talk about it, today the country talks about it, and we know that Saksham Anganwadi also is really a piece which is of Ghar. And very happy to also say that when you do a good program, it's very also nice to talk about it. People not only learn, but somewhere down the line, government at Niti Aayog has also taken our case study. So it really helps everyone if you talk about the best practices in whichever fashion that you can. So interlink of CSR, CXO is there. And to your first question which you asked him, let me tell you that CSR post-pandemic, I think, is not an also-ran. It is now core to every business. Every responsible business today does CSR, and it's the next level. We would like to say ESG. So thank you, Pooja.
Thank you. I think we need to go back to basics because public relations has always been about doing good first and then getting credit of it. Somewhere along the line, us as public relations professionals and as industry leadership, we need to go back to that principle. So thank you for that. And then reputation, the right kind of stakeholder attention, brand equity, all of that will follow. But a good, strong program is what is needed in the first place. And thank you for highlighting that. And Ghar is testimony to that. I simply love that. In that context, Nikhil, my next question to you: how do you, as we said, employees want to work with responsible organizations. How do you percolate that top to bottom approach, especially as a function or as a communications leader? And everyone is questioning at the end of the day whether it's a second in line leadership or an entry level employee. Why am I doing what I'm doing at the end of the day?
Thanks. I think I heard Mr. Nikhil speak in the morning, the more famous Nikhil speak in the morning about creating safe spaces. Yeah, I think anything to do with CSR, ESG is about creating those safe spaces. ESG, I think, is a nice, glorious term to what organizations should do by default. Yeah, environment is something that's fairly trending now because it is something that requires attention, and unfortunately, all of us are late to that bus. Social is something that organizations have been doing either by strengthening stuff outside or by taking care of their own employees. Ensuring good policies, good human resource practices, and governance is, of course, basically just running the company right, running it responsibly, having diversity in the board, and all of that. I think all of these elements very simply have to be told in the form of stories. These stories need to be told by leadership. Yeah, it's all good, doing stuff and like you said, doing good and then taking credit for it. But the genuineness of the purpose or the intent has to be communicated very clearly. there has to be clear-cut need or I can say desire felt to make a difference. And that can only be communicated by the head of the tribe. That's typically the CEO or a CXO who needs to tell that story. If that genuineness does not come out, and me and Atul are speaking, a lot of leaders don't even know where the CSR funds are going. This is a little unfortunate because I feel that CXOs, especially CEOs, need to be at the forefront of all CSR activities. Might sound a little advertising, but for me that sends out a very strong message, not just externally but more so internally. And the more people believe in the intent of the difference you're trying to make, the more they buy the story. Of course, getting people to participate in CSR activities as your employees. So there are platforms like Goodera and tons of other ones which kind of do that job for you, where your employees can feel a part of making a difference. It might be a small weekend planting trees somewhere on the banks of the river Ganges, but it just sets them free. Taking care of pets, I don't know, taking care of small children. Employees feel like they're a part of something big, contributing small amount of time rather than money or resources that really. And I think when a person knows that they are in a good, sane company that is well rooted and they are there to make a difference, I think that's what makes the difference, and that's how you communicate. Just do the right stuff, talk about it, and ensure that top management is speaking about it as well.
Thank you. I love that. CSR does belong in the boardroom, and that's how it started off. But
Pooja,
somewhere, yes.
Just quick add on to what Nikhil is saying, and this is experiential. I think you talked about how do you communicate internally, and any great CSR program has to be a bottom-up build-up program. And how do you do that? It's easier said than done. I think the employees have to devise the program. So that's the biggest way you can involve them, and that makes a crucial difference, right? And that just changes the mood within the organization. And as she was also pointing out, CSR historically has been like an extended arm of organizations, lying in one obscure corner of the office, including the team and including the objectives. But till the time you don't make it a core business objective, the difference in the impact will always be mitigated. Just to add on to what
Thank
you
you.
said.
Just also to say that I'm glad to say that I've seen from the last few years that there is a shift. The boardroom does talk about CSR. The CSR or development fraternity gets far more respect. And if I may say, ESG today, the new norm, if I may say, gets really its due. And like you said, stakeholders look at you differently. Remember when we see annual reports which actually talk about the kind of work that has gone down, or also, you go to the larger international organizations, they have a large piece, this product was picked up from rural India, from this. Suddenly you look at it with more respectability. So people, more and more, CXO CEOs do realize integrating it with the common man has become the key. And let me tell you, goodness has become PRable.
Good old-fashioned goodness. I like
So
that.
I agree with you, especially I've also been part of the infrastructure sector. So CSR is pretty predominant and pretty top management supported in certain sectors. I think what we are also trying to say here is that spirit has to percolate, cross-industrial spirit, it has to begin. And if you have certain factories, certain manufacturing facilities, then CSR comes naturally to you. But if you are an IT services organization and in some other sectors, it doesn't come naturally to you, and there is no DNA within lots of organization. But at the same time, I agree that this change is happening now.
Indu, would you like to comment on that before I go on to the next question?
Thank you for that. Hi, everybody. I've been hearing everybody, and some very interesting nuggets have come out from all of them. And I would just like to pick up on what you just said, Atul. I would say that now with IT, things have really changed, because with digital getting the center stage, and these are the organizations who can do a lot about the access, of these platforms, especially not even to the mainlands, taking it to the grassroots, taking it at every level, developing skills. There's a lot that can happen in that space, which is where technology-driven organizations are really taking a forefront in that. And maybe a lot of these things are something that government also talks about, whether it is Digital India and all of that. So that's there. Yes, I think everybody spoke about so many best practices, and probably I've also made a note of a few of them. So look forward to your question.
My question is, you've been running so many campaigns. I've had the privilege of working with you personally on some of the wonderful sustainability campaigns you have launched. What are some of the best practices that you always follow or have actually evolved and learned over the years? And most important, I think sometimes we forget, and I must say industry questions, that how do you measure the impact of public relations? And not many can deliver that. How do you also, and I'm going to ask that question to everyone here, on how each one of you as an industry leader measures the impact of public relations. Because contrary to popular belief that it cannot be measured, I strongly believe that it can be. So,
sure, that's really two very interesting questions, I must say. And I've been tracking CSR from the time when it was very philanthropic, just a check given out to the Prime Minister fund. And from there it has really reached and taken a long mile where it has reached now. Today, if I have to look at it, and that is what drives, making a campaign or any kind of a program that we do, I would say there are 3 strong P's in any CSR campaign, which is people, planet, and profits. If you don't have all 3 of them, you don't have a campaign. You are doing everything for either of them. And which is where a lot of CSR campaigns initially would not really reach the mile, and why a CX or a CEO will not really talk about it, because they do not know where it sits in the balance sheets. And that's a very important point to look at. And today when you plan the kind of goals, the kind of CTAs that you set for any kind of campaign, especially in the CSR space, and honestly speaking, CSR, ESG, sustainability are used interchangeably happily nowadays. Not many people differentiate between all of them. So with all of these nomenclatures, we have to see very clearly that they have to live the spirit of your organizational purpose. They have to be derived from there. You cannot be saying something in your purpose and driving a CSR campaign which is very different from that, because it will never go a long mile. And that's where a lot of organizations falter, because they join a fad. Something is launched by the government, everybody is talking about this, let me also take a dip into this holy Ganga and do a quick campaign. But that doesn't take you anywhere, because it is not going with you for the longer term. So always derive a goal or the focus of your CSR campaigns from what your organization wants to do. Now, if I have to give examples, and I've been really lucky, like Pooja said, I've been part of 2 organizations who have been driving very strong CSR and sustainability campaigns. I was previously with Reckitt, wherein with Dettol we used to lead health and hygiene, that kind of segment. And we used to have those kind of campaigns wherein we were even measuring with the washing of hands in the government schools, how has the attendance gone up? How have students starting coming up because they're not developing certain ailments? Or how the attendance of girl child has gone up, because of certain, aspects to that. So you have to get into that kind of, alignment as to what you really want to do. Today, I'm a part of Schneider Electric, and that will somewhere answer your questions on goal and measurements bit, because thankfully here as well, we work towards the creating access and availability of different things in the terms of energy and resources. We say we want you to make the best of it. Now when I'm talking of energy is at the data center also, energy is at the manufacturing also, but energy is also for an electrician, bread and butter. So if you do a campaign with electricians and skilling them, that is also your access to energy, because eventually that guy will start a business, provide that energy in certain village or hamlets or whatever. So you have to really understand what you want to do. Don't go by fad. Don't just look at something which somebody else is following and just start taking it up, because otherwise you will never be able to look at how you measure and all. And believe me, from a measurement point of view, you can have both internal benchmarks, you can have external benchmarks. Like I said, you could draw KPIs. We all are familiar. We are attached to KPIs in our jobs, appraisals. Very similar KPIs can be made for a particular campaign. Certain campaigns just look at dollar to dollar match. You want to have right kind of partners, wherein if I'm putting 1 million, I want to have a partner who will come on board and do that kind of a thing. Certain campaigns just want to reach an X number of people. It is all about what are you trying to do with a campaign, and that should be your goal and measurability matrix. And globally, there are a lot of scales. There's a Dow Jones Sustainability Index, there's a FTSE report which comes down, there are responsible business trackers. Believe me, there are many more, which are country specific, region specific, or, some of them are global as well. So there are too many metrics or too many external validations which are available. It's first you need to get your house in order as to what are you trying to achieve with it. And there is a lot of social impact measurement tools which are available today. There is something called IMM, which is impact monetary matrix that we all follow. So there is very clear matrix as $1 that you spend has to pay you for $2.5 or something on. In certain cases it has been a return of $8 on one. So it just depends on where are you operating. There is definitely measurability. I'm talking more from a CSR lens point of view. Same goes for PR as well. Unless you know what are you doing, you will not be able to measure. And I'm a very strong believer. Please understand the business that you are supporting. If you do not know the business KPIs, your PR will never be appreciated. If your business is going in a direction and your PR is going in some other direction, you will never get a seat at the boardroom. Talk in their jargons. When you are talking to a marketing head or a salesperson, they are not interested in ad value evaluation. They are really not interested in number of clips. What they would rather be interested is that what is the money you have spent in reaching out one person through that campaign? Can you derive it? How many people you reached out? Will it drive trials? Will it drive reputation? Will it drive something for the company? It has to do something. You can't be working out of thin air. And that's somewhere, has been, what should I say, PR people always try to defend themselves that nahi hai, it can't be measured. No, everything can be measured only if you set out the right goals. And that would be my 2 words on this. Thank you for the lovely question.
Thank you. I like that. Get your house in order. So remember, and I'm speaking to Nikhil about this, 7 years ago when I just started off in a CSR consulting firm, everyone wanted to build toilets, irrespective of whether their business was aligned or not. Our Honorable Prime Minister said, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, so chalo sab toilet banate hain.
We did World Toilet.
Yeah.
2 of them, but we were with Harpic, so it was okay.
With Harpic, yes. With Dettol, yes. But nobody turned around to ever see if people were using it. Did it impact, as you said, did the number of or the incident of diseases like dysentery or diarrhea come down, or did open defecation reduce, for example? I mean, and those are the kind of goals you set out before even think of building a toilet, for example. So I love that you talk about setting your goals right, smart goals we've been taught in all our management courses, and getting your house in order, 2 very important things. I'm going to ask you, Atul, and then you as well, Ritu, to say, how do you measure public relations? I mean, over the years, you must have been fielded this question as well.
Yeah. Not over the years, every time, especially your CEOs, this is your favorite topic, Yeah, so PR and CSR is actually favorite topic for most of us. And actually, Indu hit the nail on its head when she talked about most of the things. PR and CSR actually has been part of my profile for more than 2 decades as part of my marketing profiles. So I have 3 basic things. They may not be rocket science, but I personally feel they're very important, and I like to share that with the audience. One is the PR and the CSR teams or the PR and the CSR objectives should not be clubbed together, but at least the team should work in very close tandem together. That's my personal experience, because both feed upon each other. And for me, it has been an operational best practice. The second thing is, PR for CSR is not bad, like many people feel. But then there is a very critical element to it, which comes first, quote unquote, right? So if you are doing your PR for CSR activities, it is good. But the CSR should never be conceptualized from a PR angle, something that she was touching upon, so that's very important. The third thing is CSR has been, for me and in my experience, a pretty localized phenomena, right? Region by region, this is the area where you want to be, this is where you want to do business development, this is where you want to smoothly launch your operations. So the PR is restricted to that area, that village, that group of villages, those kind of stakeholders. I think it doesn't help in many other industries apart from infrastructure. We need to relook at that. So these are 3 PR stroke CSR experiences that I have had over the years. And coming back to your critical question, so this has been a marketing dilemma for me for more than 2 decades now, and I haven't been able to answer that question very frankly. I think in the pre-pandemic days, we were just about reaching some kind of metrics. We were cracking it with our PR agencies as to how do you showcase to the management that this is the kind of PR which is done, and most importantly, what a CXO or a CSO wants, this is how it is impacting your business. The question comes, so much PR you have done. You're talking about column centimeters, you're talking about square centimeters, but who has it, who's reading it, right? Is the target audience reading it? And I thought we were just about reaching there, and the industry veterans were coming up with solutions, and then the pandemic happened. And I think everything has gone topsy-turvy once again, right? The media landscape has changed. So how cannot PR be changing? PR has to change. Previously, the Times of India or an Economic Times or a mainline was very important, right? Today, if you go to any financial daily, the daily will, half of them are subscription based. So how do you know whether, a coverage in a business standard, whether people are reading or not, or they are just seeing subscribe and going back, right? How much of the people are now readers are going through the print media? Nobody knows. Somebody says it's coming back, somebody says it's going down. Online is restricted. You just go to the media ants of the world, you see these many footfalls. Who decides whether 5% of that footfall or 1% of that footfall has seen your article? So it's been a great marketing dilemma for me, and I feel constrained at times, knowing very well that your PR has had great impact, but I feel extremely constrained when I cannot showcase that impact to the board or to the management in the right manner that I would love to. I think in the post-pandemic era, once the media landscape stabilizes, we can start looking at some solutions. Marketing automation is coming in. AI is coming in a big way in marketing now. I'm sure it will come into PR as well, where we will use big data to analyze our PR efforts one fine day, but we are far off from there today. That's what I feel. So I hate it, but on the stage, let me just say I have no answer to your question today.
Thank you.
I would just like to add one thing on one of the pointers which you started with, which was CSR for PR actually. The moment you said that, the concept of greenwashing immediately came to my mind, and I've been reading so much about the organizations who are not doing enough but just trying to put it in a very positive way, or putting out some fabricated details or numbers and all. And my sincere request would be that as conscience keepers of your organization, as communicators, somewhere it's our job to recommend against it. because it will damage the reputation of the organization in the longer run, and you would not gain enough as much as would be lost, because building the reputation once again is not that easy. You're just making your job tougher if you're doing greenwashing today. Thank you.
So I'll quickly take you up on that question, and you know, I may have a slight divergent view whereby I agree with Indu that everything is measurable. I believe that, and I'll put it in two parts, whereby anything that we do, you know, we have large spends. When I say that, there's always an SROI, a social return on investment. Like you said, for $1 do I get 2 or do I get 10x? Your whatever may be the initiative that you've planned, obviously you have done a baseline, you've done an initiative. We hope that it is scientifically done because it is relevant and the need of that area, society or state where you're doing it. You can always go back today, and for every activity initiative we do an impact assessment. In that impact assessment, you know, have you changed the QLI, the quality of life index, the HDI? Is there impact on IMR, MMR? So while these are initiatives which you may do in 3 years, some data may come in 1 year, in 6 months, but you can always know what you put out. And to put it in a PRable way, did you get the bang for your buck? Finally, did you really create impact? Your impact assessment will tell you. When it comes to PR, there are very many surveys that tell you today that did you hit the target? Because you have set out your purpose before you do a digital campaign, whether you do a print campaign or anything that you put out externally, stroke internally, stroke to your stakeholder, whoever and wherever they may be. You have reports like the ALVA report, which tell you exactly, did your campaign, which are the sweet spots it hit? What were your gaps? You have Indian agencies here, very many which can come back, and today you can go back even to Adfactors here and say, hey, did my campaign do well? They'll come back with you, even if it's a desktop analysis, primary, secondary analysis, but you will get enough report to go back to your boardroom and say, hey, you know what? The campaign did well because I have a Mac McDonald report which has just come to me and told me the impact of Nandgarh. And I also understand what the gaps are from that report. So no money from any organization has to be spent or should be spent without scientifically understanding, did it actually make the impact? If not this, then what? And from a government point of view, if I may say, you mentioned Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, and I think it was the most beautiful PR exercise done. It made the impact where it did. Yes, behavior change is something which takes years to do. I mean, we created villages which were open defecation free. And we did realize that, I mean, you know, as people who are privileged and sitting here, we did realize that sanitation really, imagine at what level it went. So thank you. Thank you. I hope I managed to answer that.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that would be all for this panel. I think the time is over right now. And
Give one last comment for Nikhil and we'll wrap up.
we're really running out of time. But
Thank you.
okay, we can allot you 1 minute.
Yes,
That's all.
thank you.
I'll not talk on the CSR bit, I'll just talk about PR measurement. I think we have spoken a lot about CSR. I come from the sales side. For me, anything that creates demand is measurable. PR is a field of marketing, I feel, whose job is to put your product out there, get you the sales, get you the demand, get you the inquiries. And if you're clear about that, then it's good, because at the end of the day, you're not doing some grand purpose of educating the masses about insurance. You're telling them, hey, come buy my product. And as long as that's happening, the impact's created, measurable, and very, very easily understandable. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for this panel discussion.